Welcome everyone to Playtest with Kids. Thanks so much for joining. We're super excited to kick this session off. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Megan Huang. I'm a design lead at Google. I lead the Kids and Families on Google Assistant team, and I'm here with...
I'm Maya Sussman. I lead product at an ed tech startup called Parent Powered.
And so this is probably just a staple for conferences like this, but we'd love to first just get a sense of who we have in the room. So any educators in the education leaders, awesome. Any investors we have in the room? No? Yes? And then how about people who consider themselves product developers, like entrepreneurs, designers, researchers? Awesome. And who here knows what playtesting is? Raise of hands? Okay, great.
Well, when we say playtesting, what we're talking about is testing products with kids. So this could be any kind of kid product, an educational app, a game, kids media, testing and trying to get feedback from kids on these products. And we are here to launch a playtesting toolkit today. And this toolkit is a project that was made possible by the Joan Ganz Cooney Center, so we're very thankful for them. Yes, applause. And for the launch of this toolkit, we're here with a wonderful set of kids testing and research experts who are going to share their perspectives and experiences on playtesting and why it's important. So just going to give them a quick introduction. We have Jen Kotler, who leads the kids and family research and content strategy teams at Google and was formerly the vice president of research and evaluation at Sesame Workshop. We have Kylies Story, who's a senior user experience researcher at Duolingo and was previously a research scientist at the Cooney Center. We have Kathy Tran, who's done research, design, and product development work at Scholastic, Sago Mini, Osmo, and currently at Google. And last but not least, we have Maria De Roy, who's a senior user experience researcher at Amazon, who was previously focused on kids and families, and before that did research with kids products at Mattel.
So we'd love to kick off this panel just by understanding the role that playtesting plays in product development. So maybe Jen, you can help kick us off. Just telling us a little bit about playtesting. What is its role in developing products for kids?
Great, and thank you so much for having me on this great panel, and great to see all my old friends at Sesame and elsewhere. One of the things that I think is really fascinating about kid testing is that it's not just for the specific product that you're developing at any one time. It sort of gives you a sense of what children at that particular age are like in general. So yes, it's really good when you're launching a new product and you want to see how your product is doing with children of a particular age, but it also gives you a real lens into how children think about things or learn about things and just like who they are, because I think sometimes when you're so embedded in product planning and thinking that you're either thinking potentially about your own child or your own experience or your child at that particular age, and you're not thinking more broadly about other, just like the larger landscape of what children might be like at a particular age. And so I think it's both great for that particular product. Is this product usable? Is this product enjoyable? Is it doing what we thought we were going to do? That's great, but it also is really a nice lens into understanding what a 4-year-old kind of looks and sounds like. What are the kinds of things that they're talking about? What are they wearing? What do they come in telling you about? Just having those moments where you're really exposed to children who are not your own children is a really nice way of just setting the stage for why you're doing what you're doing. And, it helps on that individual product, but it's even bigger than that.
Yeah, I can understand that. I'm certainly guilty of that, just referencing what my own child does and generalizing to all children, but that's obviously not what we want to do here. Kylie, any thoughts from you and kind of the role of playtesting?
Yeah, so just a little context. So I'm a researcher, a UX researcher at Duolingo, which you may know is the ed tech company that is known for its language learning, but I actually work on a product called Duolingo ABC, which is a literacy learning app, first language, for kids preschool to second grade. And so it's a pretty new venture for Duolingo. And so kid playtesting has been absolutely vital at all stages of the product development process. Like Jen was saying, just to get a formative understanding of kids, what they're like, a foundational understanding of the kind of who are these kids? And especially when it's like such a broad age range, like 3-year-olds could not be more different than an 8-year-old. But then again, through all the different times along that product cycle. So we've done co-design before with kids. We've done concept testing with really early prototypes, paper prototypes, beta tests. We've done usability tests. We've done efficacy research, evaluative on learning. So really at all points, Duolingo is really into dog fooding, so using your own product. And I think at Duolingo, we are our learners a lot of the time, but we are definitely not our learners in this case. So it's integral.
Thank you so much for that.
So we'd love to dive into what this looks like in practice. Maria, is there an example you can share where research played a large role in the development of a product you worked on?
Yeah, for sure. So I think like the thing with testing any sort of product or testing any sort of digital experience with kids is that all of these different interactions, when they're interacting with your experience, like the taps, the clicks, like swipes, all of this stuff actually really adds up at like a really critical point in their development and has a big impact on who they can become, how they think, how they act. And so I think, with the teams I've worked with, play testing, while it can be sort of silly and whimsical, right, and very imaginative, is very serious business. Like it's very, very serious because there's a lot of responsibility that goes a lot with developing products for children, a lot of that. And so it's something like the Echo.Kids, which is a smart speaker. It goes potentially, like it's designed with kids in mind. It can potentially go inside a child's room, and that's heavy, right? Like there's a lot around that, and so we spend a lot of time thinking about what do parents need, what do kids need, like what's developmentally appropriate, and so. There, even just the look and feel of it, right? Like that's gone through playtesting for sure, where we've been able to evolve the way it looks from solid colors to rainbows and now to pandas and tigers, very whimsical. Or on the software side too, we think a lot about how does Alexa show up for kids and parents. And one space for that is reading, right? Like how can she show up in a bigger way? And reading is sort of a natural extension. And we have a skill called Reading Sidekick, in which Alexa takes turns reading with kids. And that one, too, when we started out, we started by talking to parents and testing with parents, right? And they were telling us that they were interested in something that's very metrics-focused, very focused on teaching reading fundamentals, the mechanics of it all. And had we sort of stopped there, actually, we would have created something that's boring and dry and would have taken us down the wrong direction, frankly. But we didn't, and so we talked to educators who made it very clear that hold on, we're actually teaching the fundamentals, and what we really need is just something to make reading feel fun and enjoyable. And then we started going through these iterative rounds of playtesting with kids, where really the enjoyment and the fun started to come through, and we've used that for all sorts of decisions, like how long should Alexa give a child to finish reading a page, and then knowing that kids sort of learn to read at a different clip, right? And so what does that look like, and how to individualize that, or even what does she sounds like when she supports, or what is her voice like? So for all of that, playtesting has helped us make very critical decisions.
Thank you for those examples. Kathy, you've worked on many different products for kids. Any examples you have to share of products where research really changed the course of the development?
Yeah, there's one that's particularly coming to mind, a racing game that I worked on that we tested with kids around 4 to 9 years old. And for this game, one thing that I remember is for the younger end of this age, the kids came in and play tested and made up their own rules. They would decide, the two of us are going to run into as many objects as we can. And those were obstacles in a racing game. And so that wasn't the intent of the game. And they'd be like, we're going to spin and bump into each other. And so I was trying to nudge them to there's a little map to cue them on, like who's ahead, who's behind, just to kind of show them that this is a racing game. And then I remember the 5-year-old just looked at me straight in the eye, and he's like, "We know, we just don't want to play it that way." And so what ended up happening was we tested it out with more 4 to 5-year-olds. They all came up with their collaborative version. The team added a collaborative mode to the game, which was a partnership with Ozma and Mattel. So
Such a great
wouldn't have
example.
known.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so for those who have tested with kids, we know testing with kids is somewhat unique. Testing with kids is unlike testing with adults. So would love to hear some best practices from this panel of how you test with kids. Kylie, maybe you can kick us off here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that anecdote is really related to what I'm thinking about. So I think my first point would be flexible and adaptive. So things will not always go as planned. Especially if you're working with a wide range of ages, you need to think about what is most appropriate for them at those different stages. But also, you might think that something is going to go a certain way and want kids to work a certain way. But if things turn out differently, I think we have a card that says, or the Playtest for Kids website has a card, see surprises. So when you see that something isn't going, is there insight there? Is there signal there that maybe the kid isn't wrong here, maybe your design is wrong, right?
That's great. Jen, what about you? Any tips of wisdom to share with the audience?
Yeah, I definitely think hand sanitizer is always a good idea to have.
Especially right now.
Yeah, right, especially right now. Tissues, always good to have tissues.
Snacks.
I think, again, flexibility. I liked in the cards on the website this idea of using the child's language to tell the story. And so trying not to use adult language and also trying not to use the language of the thing that you want them to talk about. So if you want them to see if they're going to use the word play, don't ask them about play. We used to try to figure out how to describe interstitials on television. They're not commercials, but they're sort of like public service. So how would you describe that to a 3-year-old? So we would say, like, what did you just watch? And then one child said, it's a little piece of television. So we started calling that a little piece of television. It's like, so you use their words and then you just hear what they're saying and then repeat back, tell me more about the little piece of television, or, just hearing things in their own words. But I also think it is really being flexible and changing course if you realize that your protocol, most researchers do have a protocol where we're trying to go down the list and you must. And for these kinds of tests, these are not scientifically validated tests. I mean, we use the word validated. We talked to 10 people, we validated our idea. I really don't like using the word validated because that is more of a statistical thing. Anyway, so, but this idea of like, be flexible, change your protocol if you're realizing the way that you set it up isn't really getting what you want, and I think just sort of going with what the kids tell you. I think that's a perfect example of what Kathy said about, they weren't doing the game the way you initially set it up, but then you went with it and just watched what happened there.
Yeah, that's great. And love the note on sanitizer too.
Yeah.
Well, we know no matter how much you incorporate best practices when you're working with kids, nothing ever goes quite as planned. So, Maria, do you have any funny playtesting stories you could share with us?
Yes. I mean, I think there's a lot. Like, I actually think that's one of the perks, right? Is that there are so many times when you just want to laugh, but you can't because it's serious stuff. But there's a lot of poop, a lot of fart talk, a lot of like really funny stories, random questions, sometimes really winding stories that you have to like listen to. But I think one thing that's always stuck with me is like I remember being in a set of sort of playtesting sessions. And so in this case, if you imagine like a focus group facility where the kids are in one place and then there's a two-way mirror and then there's a back room where like all these adults are sitting and they're trying to make important decisions and trying to observe. And so There's a group of kids, and one of the kids just sprints and tries to turn off the lights in the playtesting room. So if you turn off the lights, you're going to see everyone, all of the scary adults in the back room just staring at you. And so there was this scramble for like where all the adults just duck underneath their desks, like earthquake drill style, and meanwhile we're trying to stop the kid. And I mean, thankfully it was all okay. Or sometimes, again, in like sort of this focus group type setup where kids will come in and there may be a practiced play tester and they'll just start pointing out all of the cameras in the room even before you have a chance to set any sort of context or explain why they're there. But I actually think like beneath all of this, one thing that really sticks out to me is that I know we all try to, like for us, playtesting with kids, the kids are our experts. We are there to learn from them. They are there teaching us. And the thing is that like when we help them feel like they're the experts, they really try to do a good job and like try to be helpful. And so they take it very seriously.
I love that note on really respecting kids as the experts that they are in playtesting. Kylie, how about you? Can you share something funny that's happened during playtesting?
Mine is eerily similar. Okay, so in my previous life, I was a PhD student, and after my first year of grad school, I decided I wanted to run some co-design sessions with kids, never having done that before. And so this was a design workshop with probably like 6, 4, and 5-year-olds. And I was excited, and I brought way too much stuff, like balloons and markers and just like everything that I could get at the dollar store. So I was like, I already took a wrong turn there. And so what ended up happening was essentially chaos, right? It was like a lot of overstimulation. And so I have it all on video. A little boy stood up, started turning off and on the lights, off and on, screaming about poop. But I turned it around. I mean, I got everything back together again. But I've embraced that moment. I wrote a paper about that. I shared that video in the presentation at the conference. I've put that video in many of my job talks. I think it's evidence that I think like what I said before is that, you got to be flexible, you got to respect kids' point of views. But also I tried to integrate that into the work that I did, and now I really try and use poop and fart in pretty much everything that I do now, from now on.
Before we move on, I'm sure, Jen, you have a story here to share. Just something a playtesting session that has not gone according to plan.
I've probably had a bunch of those, but I do want to tell one story of just sort of how your own language changes meaning to children. So I was before, and I think the cards talk about this sort of like chit-chatting beforehand, making sure everyone is comfortable. And a lot of times when, back in the olden days when you used to actually be able to interview children in person before, the last 2 years, you'd go in and you'd be in a class, and an adult, you would be like, oh, Sesame is here, or Google's here, whatever, you want to come talk to them, and, half would break into tears, because, it's like, no, you don't have to come. But then there was one time I was chatting with 3 kids while we were waiting for another, and they each had like a character on their shirt, like one had a unicorn, one had a bear, the other had like butterflies, and we were talking about them, and tell me about your, and I'm like, well, I love birds, and if I'm a birder, if I didn't wear this shirt, I should have worn my bird shirt, knowing that everyone, and this little 4-year-old girl said, I love birds too, and I thought, oh, this is my, child, like this is, I love birds. I'm like, you do? She's like, yes, I love a turkey sandwich. I'm like, oh, yeah. So, just, you realize, like, in the chit-chat and that you're saying you like birds and like that was the schema that she had for birds. Like she likes to see them. So just, I mean, that wasn't a disaster or anything. But, we've also had situations where you think that you're going to get, you ask for, we just want 5 or 6 children at a time. And then they're like, here's the whole auditorium of the whole 4th grade. And then you're like, okay, what do you do? Or the night before you're supposed to go testing, the stimuli doesn't work and you can't use it. And so you act out the scene instead. So there's always ways that you can get something out of the conversation, or ask children to draw a picture of like their favorite character or 2 favorite characters talking to each other, or what show you want to watch with the 2, or what game you want these 2 to play. You can always bring figurines. So always have a contingency plan that things might not, the technology might not work. The kids who you think you're having might be doubled or tripled, or just one of them shows up. And so just having sort of contingency plans sort of makes it, and Purell, and will always, make it such that there can be something that comes out of it.
Yeah, definitely. Flexibility. I think that's what Kylie said. Flexibility is key here. So hopefully we've done our jobs here and convinced everyone that playtesting is critical, like crucial to developing great products for kids. But the road is always paved with good intentions, and it doesn't always happen, right? So we'd love to dive into now, what are some of those challenges that teams face when starting to playtest with kids, and how do we overcome some of those challenges? Kathy, anything from you here?
Yeah, a while back I worked at a startup where designers, engineers, anyone who had bandwidth and interest could play test with kids who came into the office. And one of the barriers and what stopped people from play testing I often heard was, I just didn't get anything useful from the kids, so I'm just going to go keep designing and engineering and not play test. And there were three key things that helped with overcoming that barrier. One, which we've alluded to here, is to make kids the expert. And so when a researcher, designer, or product team member asks the kid, do you like this? The answer is always, yes, I love what you made. This is fantastic. And that was not useful. And so reframing it as, you're a kid, we're adults, we're not really sure what kids like. Do you think this is for someone older than you, younger than you, or someone your age? And that's when the team heard things like, someone younger than me, this is really babyish, these colors. Someone older than me, this was too hard. I had no idea what to do. And that's where the meaningful feedback came from. See, the second thing is to make things concrete. For instance, we were doing character development, and by asking kids, what do you think of this character? The teams often got I don't know, just like a shrug. And so being very concrete, such as, where does this character live? What does this character eat? Would you want to play with this character? Who would want to play with this character? Is when the team got more meaningful feedback that drove their design decisions. And I would say the third and final key thing was be comfortable with silence. Kids need time to collect their views and their thoughts before communicating with them. These methods are all on our website, the Playtests with Kids toolkit. But one thing that I liked is just giving kids blocks or paper and a crayon, and they can just be stacking blocks while thinking about their answers, and then they'll answer it. So, yeah.
Some great tips there. Maria, what about you? Any thoughts on some of the main barriers that teams have to playtesting and ways that you would encourage folks to overcome those barriers?
Yeah, I think more broadly, I'm sure barriers. This is really great because barriers are probably something that researchers spend a lot of time thinking about. And I know one thing, just high level, even that comes up is I don't have the time or I don't have the money. And I think the thing with that is, playtesting, research in general, it's sort of risk mitigation, right? It's this very robust foundation that you're developing of needs, wants, attitudes, perceptions, different usability considerations. As you heard here, this is something you can keep reaching into again and again. You can keep building this foundation, so it's not just a one-time use thing. And, yes, you are using these resources, but also it's so much more costly to have an expensive prototype or release something and then have to sort of pivot, and that becomes costly, or have to backtrack, have to figure out why things are going awry, or even like you might not even know that it's not living up to your potential, right? So there's that. I think my strategy for that, something I really stand behind, is just sort of incorporating, like thinking about research not as a checkbox. It's not a checkbox. It's something that's very intentional, and it's actually something to make time for from the beginning, like going in knowing that you're going to be doing some sort of play testing, and you might end up doing sort of several rounds of play testing, and making time for that from the beginning. You can't really get around that. And then, yes, it's true, like you might not have the resources, right, of a big company, or maybe you're a team of one, or a smaller team, or something like that. You might not have access to researchers or designers or others who've play tested with kids, and that's all okay, because I think you're starting to get a picture here that like even talking to a handful of kids is extremely enlightening. You're going to learn something, now in terms of like very concrete strategies, you have this amazing resource with Playtest with Kids toolkit, where you can actually, like, these are tried and true strategies that you can reach for and sort of create your own playtest, create your own playtesting. And then I think like the other thing that sometimes comes up too is, well, can I actually learn something from just a handful of kids? Like I only have time for a few, but like what is this? It's not statistically significant, like what's happening? And I think actually to that, the thing with human behavior is that it's very generalizable, right? So like if you observe something in your playtest sessions once, you observe it twice, chances are, I will bet that you're going to get a lot of that out in the wild. So yes, you will be learning something, and also you're going to be challenging your assumptions. You're going to really push your thinking forward.
Yeah, definitely. I love the idea of really embedding playtesting from the start, right? It's not a checkbox, right? But it should be a part of the process for validating. Oh no, I used that word at the very beginning throughout the process.
So we've gotten so much great advice from this panel already, and I want to make sure you all walk away with some tangible next steps for playtesting. Jen, what's one piece of advice you'd give to a company that's just getting started playtesting with kids?
I think make sure that when you're starting a playtest that you go to a population that is unfamiliar to you. And so if that is your local Boys and Girls Club or your local nursery or community center, making sure that you're or not just local, or down the street in the next county, in the next town, just making sure that you're not talking to the population that you're very familiar with already. And people make a lot of assumptions about their own children, and especially in these sort of tech companies or education companies, really have highly educated parents who are very technologically savvy. Their children are too. Go to places where there are children who may not have the same opportunities, at same income levels, same education as you, and really, remember that you're trying to build for all children.
I love that. Thank you. Kathy, how about you? What advice would you share for getting started with playtesting?
I think one of my favorite sections on the Playtest with Kids website that we launch are the case studies. That we were very intentional about getting contributions from smaller companies that didn't have an in-house researcher to larger companies. And it's pretty incredible to see what meaningful insights can emerge from, as Maria mentioned, just a handful of kids. And so these case studies highlight the exact processes the product teams took to run these studies, the results, and most importantly, I think the exact design changes that were made as a result of the findings. And the other thing that I think for someone who's just starting out playtesting is in the resource section of the toolkit. Companies have shared their full testing plan. And so I think with the method, sometimes it can be overwhelming. How do I put this together? Where do I even start? And so those are full testing plans for some of their questions that I think could serve as a resource for inspiration for getting started there as well. And really just go out and do it. I think you'll learn that won't be perfect the first time. I mean, really, it's pretty much never perfect, even if you've done it hundreds of times. They're kids, and just iterate on the process and, kind of like play test your playtesting process.
I love that. Test the test, as we say, right?
Test the test, yeah.
Yeah, we have a little time. Kylie, do you have any advice you want to leave the audience with?
I'm blanking.
You've given us so much good advice. I won't put you on the spot. Do you have another question you want to ask, or should we see if anyone from the audience has something?
Yeah, I think we have some time, so why don't we can open up to questions?
All the way in the back.
Hi guys. First of all, congratulations. It's a really exciting resource. I'm Allison Bryant from Sesame, and you guys are all deeply embedded in this kind of work. And obviously, as Jim alluded to earlier, it's changed a lot in the past 2 years. And even with new platforms, and some of you guys are working on some of these, what's your number one thing on your wish list? What do you wish somebody would build for playtesting? Maybe something you've seen in the adult space, which was modified for kids. What's that thing that's out there that would make it easier, better, cheaper, more impactful for you guys?
Okay, so now that after I said it, I was blanking. Now I think this relates to something that I would say, and I would say that remote research is possible, right? I think that it feels scary, especially with little kids, and I think it could be improved. So I think hopefully someone else can build on how could it be even better. But a tool that has been amazing for my job is called D-Scout, and it is a website that allows you to run diary studies with kids asynchronously, or with people asynchronously. And I've been able to kind of manipulate it into a way such that I can get I can interact and do playtesting sessions with kids in an asynchronous way where I have parents kind of facilitate. There are obviously constraints when you have a parent sort of guiding a child through, but trying to kind of use that time where you get video data and quantitative data and trying to prompt parents to ask their kids and then writing in what they say and having lots of multiple choice. And so I think there probably could be something even better, more focused on kids, but I think looking for tools out there that you can kind of adapt to your needs would be something that I could say here.
Any other thoughts from folks?
Yeah, I think for remote testing, we've collected a lot of video data that parents and families help record and send in, and it's very time consuming to go through all these video data. So I think one thing is, I feel like a technology that looks at the emotional markers of kids and when there's a change to basically cue us in on this is a part of the footage that's worth paying extra close attention to would be really useful. If you build it, let me know. Yeah.
Any other questions? I saw Jason's hand go straight up, so.
It goes back to Kylie's question on remote testing. What did you learn from COVID in the past 2 years? I've had to work with kids online for quite a long time, and there were moments where we're like, oh my gosh, how are we, even with software, it's like, oh, it only runs on iOS. Are we going to mail out 10 iPods to these kids that I've worked with design? What are your sort of tips and tricks these days about remote testing that we can sort of take away? And what do you think about it for the future in terms of are you going to keep doing this kind of remote testing and with these kind of tips and tricks that we can sort of learn from?
I can take
Go for it, Jen.
Well, I think what's interesting is that it actually made it easier to do remote testing because children were used to being on screens more so than before. So we were all sort of surprised, actually this went more smoothly than we thought. But I think also that it also allows you to do research in more diverse places in many ways because, if you don't have to go to the school down the street, but it also means that you're more likely testing with people who have access to good technology and that kind of thing. And so we do need to be mindful of that. I do think the tools still aren't great. I love the idea of an AI kind of thing looking at emotional prototyping tools for the difference between testing with like 3 to 5-year-olds on Zoom versus like the 6 to is like 9, whatever. It's like a whole different world. You feel like you're having a full-on adult conversation with the older kids. But the prototyping tools are still not great. That like so that's whether you're in person or not, this idea of, this goes to Allison's question too, just to have better prototyping tools that researchers, when they want to test something out, they can do that quickly without needing sort of a designer help to make that protocol much more interactive. For the little ones, it's very hard to test mocks with, other than, do you like this picture? Because that's what they're basically saying, I like this picture. Whereas, something more interactive. But I think that the virtual testing has not been as hard as I thought it was going to be, because kids are used to school that way.
Do you all do more asynchronous now these days with testing, or is it always synchronous?
We do both.
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
I have a little something to add. The companies that we talked with for the toolkit, there are 2 remote tips that I especially liked they're detailed on the website, but one is Osmo would send a slide deck to parents of, make sure like your iPad's charged, make sure you've installed this program. This is how we'd like you to set up your iPad in the game. This is what the researchers would like to see on their screen when they're watching. And that's been very useful for them. And Sego Mini actually sends out pointers to parents about how to interact with their kids during playtesting. Because before, they would encourage the parents to view the kids from a distance when they're in a physical space. But it's things like, try to not instruct your kids and guide them. If they ask a question, just say, try and see what happens. Oh, what do you think? Things that researchers do. They helped guide parents to get more valuable data as well.
Essentially training the teachers to be kind of co-researchers in the process, it sounds like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I love that too, actually, because I know like we really have to be thinking a lot about how to tell the parents, like what is the parents' role, especially if they're there with the child, and how do you, like, in what capacity do they help? But then at the same time, it does help when they can like restate a question to a child. Or I remember being in one situation where the child just really didn't want to talk, and she was very shy, and that's okay. But then her mom was there, and so she whispered to her mom, and her mom told me, and it actually was great. Like, I got a lot of great insights. But I think there's both sides to it, for sure. There's like an appropriate level of parent involvement, and then there's like, sort of methodologically rigorous from a research perspective.
I think we might have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Someone here on the right side.
Yes. I just wanted to know how all this ties in with the talk's name and the free online resource for
Oh, that's a great
Were you a
segue.
plant? Yeah.
this online resource and this here about
Absolutely. So we were going to end on that, but I can share right now. So we have this website that is up now. It's at playtestwithkids.org. And it really builds on everything we're talking about here. It came out of years of talking to folks doing this type of research with kids. Thank you.
Joan Ganz pretty set up.
Yeah, so everyone on this stage contributed to it in one way or another. We've got contributors from companies all over, but supported by the Cooney Center. And there's methods that get at some of the strategies we've talked about here, specific tips, questions to use with kids, case studies written by researchers at a bunch of different companies, Sesame, PBS, Google, and then some of these additional resources that Kathy mentioned, templates and sample protocols. So really intended to be a one-stop shop for getting started with playtesting. We don't want folks to have to reinvent the wheel, like I think we've all felt we were doing at some point. So that's the idea behind the website. Anything to add?
No, I think that's about it. Everyone should please visit it. And if you have methods to contribute, case studies to contribute, we see this as a resource that we hope to continue to nurture and grow, and just to be a resource for all teams to really bring play testing into part of their process.
We have little cards on the chair back there with the website on it to remind you if you want to grab one on the way out.
Any last questions, or I think we're good? Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending.